Great. Commissioner Okan, could you call the roll, please?
Sure. Commissioner Cruz? Commissioner Eggenberger?
Here.
Commissioner Foster?
Good evening.
Commissioner Jankowski? Commissioner Okan here. Commissioner Singh, not here. Commissioner Watkins is not here. Commissioner Weber? And Chairwoman Zuber.
Here. All right. We have minutes from January 11th. Does anybody have any comments on those? Or want to make a motion?
I move we approve the minutes from January 11th.
Support.
Right, I have a motion from Commissioner Eggenberger and support from Commissioner Foster. I'm going to have to remember everyone's last names really quickly now. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have the agenda for tonight. Do we have any late-breaking items to add, Patrick?
We do not.
Okay. Oh, I forgot to mention that Patrick Sloan and Aaron Schluto are here from the Planning Commission, or from the Planning Department, and we have Sarah Gabus here as our legal representative, legal something. What are you, legal? Legal what? Here to help, thank you. We appreciate that, all the help we can get. Okay, so nothing from the, nothing additional on the agenda. Do I hear a motion to accept it?
Support.
All right, I have a motion by Commissioner Weber and support by Commissioner Eggenberger. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, very good. Communications, Patrick.
No additional communications outside of the packet.
Okay, excellent, thank you. All right, our first item on the agenda is a public hearing for Berkshire Apartments. We're going to consider the planned PDD amendment on parcel number 061-99-0007-707, also known as 1315 Waterside. The property is located on the north side of Salts Road between Canton Center and Beck. The proposal is an amendment to some of the modifications previously granted for this multifamily residential PDD. Patrick, can you give us the details?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yeah.
In 2020, the Township Board had approved the final plan development district and site plan for Berkshire Apartments. And this is a 172-unit apartment development on the north side of Salts Road, west of Waterside, west of Canton Center Road. And since the time it was approved, there have been some changes proposed to the internal sidewalk network. The overall layout of the development is the same. The overall number of units is the same. The style of architecture is the same. The differences are that some of the sidewalks within the interior of the development have shifted and have been moved to different parts of the internal streets. And as a result of that, when the sidewalks get moved, some of the units get pushed back to maintain the 22-foot setback from the edge of the sidewalk to the front of the garage, which allows for the car parking. And so the improvements are much better than what the approved plan was. On the approved plan, some of the sidewalks were on sides of the internal street where there were no units, but they were put there as a way to have internal pedestrian access. But at the time, the project engineers didn't think that they were able to do sidewalks in front of the units in certain parts of it. And as they've gone through the township engineering review and they've adjusted their layouts, they find that there is in fact room in front of a lot of these units to put an internal sidewalk. So as a result, the applicants, the developer has made that adjustment on the plans to move those sidewalks so that there's more units that are being directly served by having a sidewalk in front of them. And the units are being shifted back by 5 feet, which is the width of the sidewalk, to maintain that setback from the road so that the vehicles can clear the area between the sidewalk and the garage. So as a result of that shifting, some of the buildings on the interior have gotten a little bit tighter together. So the modifications that are being proposed are for setback modifications to be tighter, and it only affects the internal building. So it doesn't affect the setbacks to any adjacent properties or anything like that. And we've listed out all of the different changes that have taken place to the separation distances. Another minor adjustment has been the length of buildings 5 and 24 have been lengthened by a little under 5 feet each one. So it's a very small lengthening, but it is something that is a modification according to the standards of the ordinance. So even though these are very minor types of changes to the modifications, they do require the plan development amendment process to be followed. So it's quite a formal process for what doesn't seem like a major change, but that's just the procedure that we have. And I'm trying to think what else. The last thing I'll say is that one of the unique things about this development is that the original plan development was approved, I think, in the late 90s or early 2000s. And at that time, a lot of the infrastructure was put in underground. So when they originally designed Berkshire Apartments recently, a lot of that water and sewer was already put in. So the developer at the time was limited in terms of where things could be laid out. So that's why back in 2000, it wasn't thought that some of these units could have a sidewalk in front of them based on the location of the infrastructure and where they had to put the buildings. But fortunately, as they've gotten closer to constructing the buildings and building out the development, they found they have room for the sidewalk on the internal areas and adjacent to the units. So that's been a market improvement. So that concludes our report. Our recommendation is approval, and we'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Patrick. It's a public hearing, so do you want to entertain a motion? I want to entertain a motion.
Make a motion to open the public hearing.
All right,
So moved.
all right. We have a motion by Commissioner Weber and support by Commissioner Foster. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, public hearing is open. Does the project sponsor want to speak? Come on up, please, yeah.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Planning Commission members. My name is Mark Kassab with Berkshire Apartments, 31550 Northwestern Highway, Farmington Hills, Michigan. Jim Galbraith, who's been working with Patrick for the last couple of years on this project, unfortunately couldn't be here this evening. However, he and I do work together on this project collectively. As Patrick well noted in his notes to the Planning Commission, we see this as an improvement. Sidewalks were across the street from some of the units, so they had to cross the street to get to a sidewalk versus a sidewalk on the same side of the road, which caused some of these buildings to squeeze in a little bit more. And from a belt and suspender standpoint, we all felt it would be proper to amend the PDD agreement with the township. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak about this project?
Madam Chairman, I move to close the public hearing.
All right,
Support.
okay. We have a motion.
What is the starting price of the units? What's the cost of the?
I'm sorry, could you please step up to the mic and say your name and address for the record, please?
Greg Rosinski in Cobblestone Ridge. Just a quick question, what are the starting costs per unit roughly? Do we know?
The project sponsor can answer that question possibly. Is that something you can answer?
So this is a for-rent project. As the commission may know, this is not a for-sale project. The starting rents, in talking with our marketing department, approximately $2 per foot, and I believe they're about 1,500 or 1,600 square feet, so it equates to about $3,000 per unit on average.
Thank you.
All two-bedroom, two-car garage units.
Excellent, thank you. Do we need to remake a motion?
It's still on the table.
Okay. We have a motion on the table from Commissioner Weber and support from Commissioner Foster. Any further discussion? All right, all right. Call the, I'm sorry, I'm still learning this.
You're doing just great.
Thank you. So all in favor of closing the public hearing, support, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, public hearing is closed. Let's discuss this. Commissioner Ocon, what do you think?
No comments, I'm good. Thank you.
Eggenberger?
I also have no concerns.
Commissioner Janowski? I'm sorry. No concerns. All right. Very good. Commissioner Cruz? Can you turn your mic on?
Yeah, the plan's definitely an improvement from the last one, but one thing I'm noticing is the ADA spaces don't immediately have walks accessible to them on all ADA spaces. And it looks like some of them do, but some of them don't. And it looks like walks could have been added for access for these, all ADA spaces. It would have been a better plan to accommodate all ADA with a sidewalk. For example, Building 2 at the southeast, there's an ADA space just hanging out there. I guess they go across the street to access the walk.
On Building 2, there's a number of ADA spaces as required, I believe per the ordinance and probably per state or federal ordinance as well. As it pertains to Building 2, there is an ADA parking spot there. However, there is no sidewalk because there's driveways on the end of that building. I don't know if you have that building. Oh, there it is, Patrick. There's a sidewalk across this road, but there is no sidewalk that would be leading to anywhere from that particular location. Challenge is, if you look at Building 2, if you did what we did on the end of Building 1, if you could scroll over there, Patrick, it would then squeeze these units further together. If you put that sidewalk in front to require the walkway on the back of curb. As I think Patrick noted out, we've kind of constrained here with the underground that was already in with the site, with the sanitary, the storm, and the water. And the road pattern was already in. Building 1 and 2 are already up. It's 6 and 2 are up, and Building 1's under construction.
What about the community center? Can we go to the community center? That's probably the most used parking.
Correct.
So these ADA spaces, why not extend the walk so that someone that parks there can immediately go to the walk? I guess there's not much required to do that without, you don't have to shift anything.
Possibly add a connection to the walk
A better design.
up there, close to that, to tap in there. I
For
know
both
it is
spaces.
flush with the pavement. Can I go to that?
Yeah.
If you talk while you're at the screen, we won't hear you on the recording, so unfortunately.
This is flushed with pavement here, so the wheelchair can pull up this way, versus if we had it here, I believe there's a grade issue from here to here. Extend the walkway to the corner here. Yeah, and that way someone, as opposed to have them walk or pull the wheelchair up on the surface here, go this way.
Sorry. It's a different one. So our ADA is administered by the building official, and when the planning commission or the township board approves a site plan, The plans then go to the engineering division for a thorough engineering review. They review kind of a level 1 review when they look at a PD plan or a site plan, and then they do an in-depth engineering review after the PD and after site plan is approved. And then once engineering review is done and it goes to the building division for review, they apply the ADA code throughout the development. So sometimes a barrier-free space may shift in a different place. Sometimes a sidewalk may be put in somewhere or a ramp put in somewhere as the building inspectors and the building official apply the ADA codes to it. So sometimes when it gets from the site plan stage to the building division stage, there are things that change with accessibility and engineering and building standards. But at the time when building permits are issued, they include the engineering division and the planning division as plan reviewers. So we look at them, we look at the plans at the building review to see what changes have taken place and if they're compliant with the approved site plan.
I think they should be shown on this plan, because it can change the parking count. If you lose a space there, that changes your parking count. So I think that striping, you show the striping for the other van accessible.
So the clubhouse, as you may know, is existing, has been existing for 20-some-odd years before my time with the entity. And the clubhouse is actually managed by the HOA, that we have a use sharing agreement with the HOA to utilize the clubhouse for the guests of the apartments in addition to the traditions. So any sort of modifications to the clubhouse would need the HOA approvals and buy-in. And
But I know you can't just put a symbol on it and call it a day. I know you
I-
can't do that.
You know, and I could tell you with
I don't
working
care.
with the HOA,
I
the
don't care if
only,
it's existing.
yeah, the only plan that they
wrong.
have with the parking of the clubhouse is to repave it and restripe it, as opposed to.
If there's an issue with ADA, then our building official will look at it.
Certainly will make that addressed if there is an issue with that.
Okay.
Good comments, thank you, sir.
Commissioner Foster.
No comments, thank you.
Commissioner Weber.
One positive comment, I like the fact that you moved the sidewalks to sides that are inhabited by buildings. I just think it's a more pleasing design, I think it works better. One of the other comments I have is going back to building 2, and that
Can you speak into the mic? I'm so sorry.
I wasn't given a microphone.
Now you've got one.
One of my other, well, should I say my first comment again first? I'm pleased that you put the sidewalks on all the sides of the streets where the buildings are. I think that's more practical. I think it's a more pleasing design. But the one question I do have, and it's going back to building 2, and that last spot that happens to be an ADA space. Since it's now only 10 feet away from the building, is there any potential issues there with a car coming in there and with headlights coming on? I don't know where the windows are on these units are. If the headlight glare and stuff could be coming in the windows of that place, it's awfully close. I don't know if there's any thought to putting any kind of greenery there or anything like that that would shield that, but that just seems like an awful short distance for a parking spot to the building to me.
Good comment. So certainly this is just a site plan without a landscape plan attached to it. We're very sensitive from shielding of lights, not only from that parking spot, but there are some others that if a car were parked there with headlights, it would be shining into. So it's not uncommon for us to beef up the landscaping around areas that may impact a unit. Again, these are rentals, and it would not be good if a renter wasn't happy because lights were shining in their bedroom on the first floor all day, or all night, I should say.
So that'd be my only suggestion, is address that in some way.
Absolutely.
Other than that, I have no other comments.
Thank you. And I think, I agree. I think that moving the sidewalks is great. I'm glad you were able to do that, and it's a small price to pay to move the buildings a little bit closer. So, thank you.
I may add, and again, Jim, working with Patrick, what that also allowed us to do, and a lot of this originated on Stonewall, which is adjacent to the residential to the west, is to further screen between the residents and the apartments to prevent lights and noise and so forth between the two. Thank you.
There's the,
Yeah, this is the approved landscape plan from 2020. So one of the benefits, at least on the first story, is that there's a garage of the separation, so there'll be a little bit ease there, and then, so there'll be a garage here that's about 10 feet from that parking space, and then the upper floor, it may be living space, but it's elevated. So they do propose some trees there in the buffer area. Yeah, they're
About
gonna have to
10
shift
feet.
those.
We should be able to fit in some nice evergreens.
or comments or concerns? Or a motion? Okay.
I move to recommend approval of amendment number 1 and associated site plan changes to the Berkshire Apartments PDD on tax parcel 0619900067707 as provided in the plan development agreement and plan documents, subject to all state, county, and township requirements.
Support?
Support.
All right, I have a motion by Commissioner Weber and support by Commissioner Foster. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. All right, very good, thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a nice
Best of
evening.
luck, thank
Thank
you.
you.
I know. Nope. All right, so we have no old business for this evening, but we have some new business. We have the BJ's Wholesale Club gas station. Consider a site plan on a parcel, 2 parcels as noted there on Ford Road. Property is located north side of Ford Road between Morton Taylor and Sheldon, between Target and BJ's and lots of other businesses back there. Proposed use is an automobile filling station. Patrick, could you tell us more?
Sure, thank you. As most of you may recall, in 2022, there was a plan development that was approved for the gas station at BJ's Wholesale Club. Back in 2021, the PD agreement was amended so that the former JCPenney could be converted to the BJ's Wholesale Discount Store. And a few months ago in 2022, BJ's proposed another amendment to the PD agreement that would allow for a gas station on the subject site here outlined in yellow on the aerial map. The area is located, as you noted, between Target and BJ's and Lowe's, between Sheldon and Morton Taylor on the north side of Ford Road. And the size of BJ's, it's about 104,000 square feet and a 415 space parking lot. And it has an access drive that comes in directly from Morton Taylor Road, and you can get to Sheldon Road on that same access drive. It was recently reconstructed, so it's much more smooth now. The proposed site where the gas station is, that's that site in the middle. It's heavily vegetated. It's been marketed for a number of years. The terms of the approved PDD amendment that was approved a few months ago in 2022, it allowed for an automobile filling station on this subject site. And what it is it's a fuel station that serves members of BJ's. There may be an option for non-members to buy gas there, but I think the price would be much more expensive. So it's a place where it's discounted gas, and I think BJ's offers points for fuel. So the terms of the PD agreement were that the gas station has to be ancillary to BJ's Wholesale Club or a successor user, and only available to members of BJ's Wholesale Club. So I think it is a membership only, but I think with the cost of membership that it's more advantageous to have the membership and then use the fuel, similar to like a Costco. The filling station has to comply with the requirements of the zoning ordinance with regard to filling stations. So in the proposed site plan this evening, the site does comply with the zoning standards for fuel stations. The third item of the PD agreement is that the hours of operation for the fuel station are limited to between 6:30 a.m. and 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 6:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Sundays. There also can't be any outdoor amplification or speaker system. The kiosk that's shown on the site plan is only for the employee to staff the fuel station. There's no retail, no vending, or anything like that. And the use of the restroom building in the kiosk is for the employee and contractor use only. There's at least 25% open space on the property, which is required in PDDs.
Sorry.
BJ's will convert 4 existing parking spaces on the west side of the building to electric vehicle charging stations, which shall not be less than level 2 type stations. So those charging stations are shown on the site plan. And then finally, the PD requires an easement to be placed on the gas station site for placement and maintenance of public art by the DDA. The location was to be determined during site plan review, and on the site plan, it's shown in the northwest corner of the site. For the land use for the gas station, the land use is consistent with the PD agreement and compliant with the requirements of the zoning ordinance. For the access management and traffic, the findings in our site plan report are the same as they were in the plan development report. We did include the traffic impact report just as background information, just to carry forward from the PD to the site plan, although nothing in the reports have changed. The standards for gas stations are all met. It meets the minimum lot area of an acre. The lot coverage doesn't exceed 10%. It meets all the minimum setbacks for the canopy, the pump islands, and the building, as well as the rear and side yard setbacks for the same. The ingress and egress drives are a minimum of 30 feet and do not exceed a max width of 36 feet. For the parking and stacking, the zoning ordinance requires 2 parking spaces per pump island, plus other applicable requirements for other uses. There are 6 pump islands with a pump on each side, so there are 12 pumps. So each one has its own parking space next to it where a vehicle is being fueled. Additionally, there's area behind each pump to the west for 3 queuing vehicles. So the 12 pumps can accommodate 48 vehicles, both the 3 queued vehicles plus the 1 vehicle that's fueling. During the PDD review, the area behind the pump allowed for 2 queuing vehicles, which accommodated 36 vehicles total. But to prevent backups, if demand is higher than expected, the pavement on the west side of the site was widened slightly to allow for 1 additional queuing space for each of the 12 pumps. So if demand is much higher, like on a weekend day where people are out shopping and they want to use their fuel points, then there's a much better chance that that traffic's going to be accommodated on the site and that there'll be a much less chance of backups. There are 3 off-street parallel spaces on the west side of the site, which will be used for employees and contractors. During PD review, these spaces were perpendicular, but they were converted to parallel to minimize the pavement and to allow more queuing space. The fuel tanks are on the east side of the site, and they have a continuous 12-foot wide loading area adjacent to them on the west. The architecture of the kiosk meets the brick requirements of the zoning ordinance of being at least 50% brick, and it has mechanical screening on the top of the roof it's got the mechanical screening that's required by the zoning ordinance. For the landscaping plan is included with the site plan packet, and it's designed to comply with the requirements of the zoning ordinance for the general site landscaping and the parking lot landscaping. And there's also a replacement tree proposed to replace a regulated tree that's being removed. The site also has a lighting photometric plan that is designed to comply with the zoning ordinance. The non-decorative lights are 20 feet high, which is the maximum height permitted by the zoning ordinance. The site plan also shows decorative light poles along the north and east sides of the site, which is consistent with the design and spacing for other fixtures along those sides of the access drive. Those are the decorative green fixtures that we see along Ford Road and in other parts of the DEA. There's a ground sign that is shown and canopy signage as well. Both are sized to meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance. although there may be some items that come up when the building division reviews the sign for the text height. So dimensionally, the signs comply with the zoning ordinance, but the sign permits themselves are reviewed by the Building and Inspection Services Division when the building permit takes place. So there are minimum text height standards that are in the zoning ordinance that the Building Division will take a closer look at when they review those permit applications. For the garbage removal, there's no dumpster on site because the site is not expected to generate enough garbage to warrant a dumpster. BJ's Wholesale has a trash compactor in the northwest corner of the building where the trash will be transported by BJ staff from the gas station to the compactor. As we previously noted, the public art easement is in the northwest corner of the site, adjacent to the northern access drive and outside of the utility areas. This is an area where the DDA will be able to place one of the art pieces, some of which are along Ford Road, but they all have to be within the DDA district. And finally, the PD agreement was approved by the Township Board. It has not yet been executed and recorded, but there are a few minor changes that are being coordinated between the applicant and the township before the PD agreement can be executed. We agree to the terms, it's just some of the language in there, I think mostly relating to the art easement language, but it's fairly minor language that we should have resolved in the near future. So our recommendation is approval of the site plan for the automobile filling station, subject to all state, county, and township requirements, and subject to the execution of the PD agreement prior to township board review of the site plan. The last item that I'll note is, and I touched on it during the previous case, is that the process for the site plan review will be, the Planning Commission will review the site plan and make a recommendation. The recommendation is based on the standards of the zoning ordinance and the terms of the plan development agreement, which is previously approved by the Township Board. If the Planning Commission approves the site plan with conditions, that will go forward to the Township Board of Trustees, and the Township Board of Trustees will take final action on the site plan. If the site plan is approved, the next step will be for the Township Clerk to sign the site plan as approved, and the applicants will then go to the Township Engineering Division. The Engineering Division has looked at the site plan as kind of a level 1 review in terms of feasibility, but the detailed engineering review doesn't take place until after site plan review. So that when an applicant goes to the Township Engineering Division with engineering plans, they know that when they go in, it's a plan that's approved by the Township Board and the Planning Commission. And the Engineering Division will compare the site plan that's submitted for engineering and compare that to the approved site plan that's on file to make sure that what's being reviewed at engineering is consistent with the approved site plan by the board and the Planning Commission. And then if the Engineering Division approves the engineering plans, then the applicant will then go to the Building Division for the building permits. And when the Building Division has the permit application on file and the building plans on file, it adds the Engineering Division and the Planning Division as the plan reviewers. So staff will look at this again when they go in for their building plans. I don't know how long it'll take for them to submit building plans, but when they do and they go to the Building Division, what we do is when we look at do our plan check in the Building Division, we take the approved site plan from the board and the Planning Commission, we compare it, make sure it's consistent. If it's not consistent, corrections have to be made, or if there are areas where there are changes and they're within the scope of the ordinance for administrative changes, sometimes minor changes take place. But we address those at those times, so that's just a little bit of a background in terms of some of the checks that we do throughout the process before anything is permitted or before anything breaks ground.
Thank you, Patrick, for the detailed description there, too, of the process. We do not need a public hearing for this, so would the project sponsor like to tell us more?
Thank you, Chairperson Zuber, for the opportunity. Brian Amon on behalf of BJ's. We have Bill Zanoni and other representatives from BJ's here. Other than answering any questions you may have, Patrick was thorough, not only in the project, but also the process. And so we'll rely on that and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thanks. All right, we'll start with Commissioner Janowski. Janowski, I'm sorry. I can only do that when I'm reading it. Remember. Could you speak into the mic, please? I'm sorry.
when I'm looking at this, I was looking at the numbers and stuff, and the actual functional flow of the traffic into those spaces is a concern that I have.
Appreciate the question. You can take a little comfort, and BJ's obviously has essentially almost every other BJ's store they have a fueling center and have a lot of experience in operating this. And so they brought all that experience to bear as to how these actually lay out and how they flow in conjunction with the township engineer review. And everybody's actually thought this ultimately was the most efficient layout for traffic flow through and not stacking up. So it's, I appreciate your concern, but it's been reviewed by and based on the years of experience, this is actually a greater comfort level that this is the best layout they could have had versus orienting them the other way. It works out better this way in terms of where the stacking occurs and everything else. So.
All right, Commissioner Cruz?
Why wasn't this gas station proposed with the BJ's originally?
As a matter of process, they didn't own the property, and they had to work out a different deal with the owner of the property, which came subsequent to the store. And the store, they came in essentially to repurpose the old JCPenney, so that was a fairly more straightforward process. And so it was, honestly, we got to it more quickly than the details that had to come behind this project. They've had great demand from a lot of the customers for the fueling station since the store's opened, but because of the process and everything involved, it was a matter of being later in time. So yeah, I couldn't get it done as quickly.
I got you. How long has BJ's been open here?
October, I'm sorry, I thought it was August, but he says October.
My concern is this traffic study. Waitrim points out a few things here, that Saturday peak hour data was never conducted. It surprises me, and it looks like you studied existing sites, but never really studied this particular site. And now that it's up and running, it seems like you should come up with actual data that's more current than what we're looking at here.
Well, yeah, obviously, there, as you can appreciate, being an engineer yourself, certainly getting traffic data during the period of COVID and all these other things has been an interesting process. So they thought ultimately the best sources of trying to understand what they have from other locations, what they know the flows are, to apply that here. Certainly, we'll be continuing to work with engineering through the process on the more detailed site plan review to see if any questions they have are still in question. But ultimately, between Wade Trim and the others, they ultimately felt that there was excess capacity as it relates to, even if for some reason there was some question about it, that in terms of the stacking internally and everything else. So, but it's going to be something that's continuing to look at as we go through the process with the
Is
township.
anyone here that prepared the report, or?
No, I don't think we have the traffic engineer here. Yeah, Bill Zanoni, the real estate director, can direct it.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, I mean, we have comfort in the township's engineering traffic has a
Well, for
lot of experience on
quick
this.
example, I mean, you didn't study this site in particular, you studied existing sites. How do you know how much traffic is coming into Sheldon versus Ford Road versus Morton Taylor? How do you know that?
Well, I can address Bill Zanoni, BJ's Wholesale. I live actually in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. We studied the fuel center aspect of the other clubs, and actually Chesterfield is our #1 fuel consumer in the entire chain for us. So we
Road
use
is that off of John R?
that's where's that at? It's
Chesterfield Township.
yeah, north. It's the
Oh, okay.
northwest, northeast,
Detroit.
north of Detroit. So as far as studying likely actual memberships, our as far as our club members are concerned, we're losing members because we don't have fuel. So as far as studying like X number of members versus, it's a function of the fact that we don't even have the same number of members at these clubs as other clubs that were studied in the report that you have. So we're actually under our membership numbers for a traffic study input, As far as going out and studying like number of
To that point,
members.
though, then, essentially, this site was over-engineered for the maximum Chesterfield
Absolutely.
service level, even though we have an under
Right.
those numbers of membership. But to your point, I want to ask
Go ahead.
one particular question. Wade Trim and the traffic study did have all the data regarding what's flowing on Sheldon and Ford and all the other stuff. They have all the traffic data as it relates to the area and the grids that's occurring. I mean, because of what's coming with Ford Road construction, there's an amazing amount of data that exists relating to what's happening here, including the service drive, the private drive that's part of this project. So there was data that was all part of that project.
My concern with that is, today I spoke with this Martin Parker, and he was saying the data that you're mentioning was taken in December. That's not usual. Usually it's summer, and at that time, the ramps were closed on Ford Road. He thought they were open, but I checked, they were actually closed, so there was actually,
Which ramps are you referring to?
the ramps on Ford Road, those were closed.
Ford
So-
Road to
From where?
275.
275
Yeah,
and Ford, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
okay.
Yeah, so,
But I'll tell you, December, as you know, December with Target and all the other retail here, December is the high water mark for traffic in this section. That's when those parking lots are the closest to max, closest to everything else. It's up to Christmas and up to that season. That is the high water mark.
well, what he was saying, they were down, that volume was way down, and he said it could have been because of COVID, who knows, but it's taken in December. It's not usual that traffic counts are taken in December.
That's why we ultimately applied the traffic data from Chesterfield, which is the highest use location they have in the country.
Yeah, I get that you did that. How do you calculate, so do you keep track of who goes to BJ's and makes a fuel transaction?
Yes, that was actually based on the incremental visits, and you'll see data in the study that shows X number of visits. There's X number that are drive-by of members who come by, but there's also Y number of people who shop in the store and then get fuel. So they've actually broken it out accordingly.
What about the person that's a member of BJ's that doesn't shop and decides to go and get gas?
Yeah,
How does that
that's
factor?
part of the study. The study actually reflects that number. It talks about, I think it was something 17 visits of, I saw the number about, literally, there are X number that they say that don't go into the store, they just come by to get fuel. And there are members who come by just to get fuel, and that was all quantified in there as well. They have pretty solid data about that because it's credit card or debit card only in terms of transactions, so they are able to track as to who's where and when.
Yeah, so what troubles me about this is that putting the gas station is going to generate more traffic, is what you're saying. Well, you
There's-
just said that membership was down without a gas station.
Membership is down, but as far as our projection, I told you that our volume is based off the highest volume club in the nation for BJ's. So our trip generations and our stacking and everything else is based off a Chesterfield traffic count projection, not a membership projection. It's actual trips counted going into our fuel centers.
And I'll tell you, I can appreciate, certainly there is an expectation that there would be an impact on traffic, thus the need for the traffic study. And that's why we decided to go to the highest possible watermark and engineer for this site. But I'll tell you, and I know you're an engineer, civil engineer, so you probably have a lot of great insight to this. The township engineers have certain standards they have applied historically, and so if you have questions about those, I encourage you to talk to them about that. But this project meets all parking and traffic and other requirements and exceeds it. So as it relates to your ordinance, I appreciate your concern, but your engineers have already determined that we're going to be fine. So if you have a question about that as it relates to that, I would encourage you to talk to them about that and look at how you would affect their written standards going forward. But as to this project meeting the requirements of this township, you've heard the planner's report and your engineer's report that we meet, in fact, exceed that,
Are
so.
you saying we can't question this then, Mr. Raymond?
No, I'm not saying you can't question it, but I'm saying ultimately you have to trust your own consultants, which are applying your standards, your data, and whatever in this.
else, Commissioner Cruz?
Yeah, I get that you've used data from your highest volume store. I think that every site's different. This site in particular has Ford Road, and there's going to be future improvements to Ford Road. Traffic data has to be factored in accurately. In addition, there's service drives that will affect Target, and Lowe's, I believe, is connected.
Correct.
So I recommend that a new study be conducted to show the traffic coming from each side, especially since BJ's is running now, and you can get actual data, not someplace else that you think is more busier. That's what I recommend, and that's based on the area, you know, and I think that will be an accurate representation study, and it also will benefit Canton for Ford Road because you'll have more current, accurate data since it's already functioning right now.
I appreciate that, and I also understand the concern around trying to get a good snapshot of like what the real condition is or whatever. But you also acknowledged one of the more important factors that's going to occur. The township, through all the bond dollars it's in fact now raised, is about to undertake significant activities in terms of construction along Ford Road for curbing and putting islands in and things like that, which are all by its own studies are going to ultimately quiet and solve a lot of other those issues. So we are certainly going to be planning to open up and constantly engineer and constantly watch it. It's more important to us than anybody that traffic can actually get in and out of this site, obviously. But I think we're all going to have to pay attention to what happens based on what the township's planning to do through the islands along Ford Road, what it's supposed to do to improve the traffic flow and quiet the entire corridor down. So we're all going to have a watershed moment in the next 2-3 years to come as that process starts. So I'm not sure how much we can tweak prior to then until we really know what's going to occur out of that. But
And to add to some of that is when the wage trim report did conclude that the traffic generated by the fueling station would not change the level of service or greatly impact the operation on Ford Road. And when we looked at traffic for this one, we looked at two different things. The first is the impact on the surrounding road system, and the internal network that they have allows the traffic to disperse not only to Ford Road, but also to Sheldon and Morton Taylor. So there's multiple ways that people can get in and out of the site in terms of trying to prevent any backups, both internal to the site and the adjacent road network. And the other thing that we looked at was the throughput through the gas station site itself, with making sure that there was that additional row of queuing during site plan review to try to, if there were a lot of cars that were coming through, to try to maximize the chance that we could accommodate more throughput on that site by stacking more cars in that additional area on the west side. So those are things that we've both looked at as staff and engineering from both the disbursement of traffic and the throughput that's on the site.
Patrick. Commissioner Foster?
I don't really have a question, just more of a comment. I guess, as far as traffic is concerned, I'm not as worried about it because it doesn't sit directly on Ford Road, and the gas station is only open to members of the club. I think if it's open to the public, or if it's sat directly on Ford Road, I think I would be a little bit more concerned. I am concerned, and this is probably neither here nor there, about, people using that road as a through road to access the club and what that does to the condition of that road. I know we just redid it, and it's lovely now, but it was terrible
by the way,
for a
we
while.
join you. It was literally the pressure of the township process through us to the landowner to get that fixed, and we've strengthened the terms in the lease agreement to make sure it stays maintained because of the problems the township has had over the years, because we don't want to have that problem for our customers. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Weber?
I have a couple comments, and they're sort of maybe piggybacking on Commissioner Cruz's, although maybe not as pointed. I am concerned about the stacking on the site, and the reason I say that is I'm sure you've been to the Costco on Haggerty Road, and particularly on a weekend when you go there, they have a lot of space, and it gets backed up quite heavily back into their service drive. So Patrick says all the numbers are met. I have to take the engineer's word for it and Patrick's. But it is a concern for me, and I can see the traffic backing up into that service road. The other part, the other criticism.
Can I respond to that one part of it, though? Because, yeah, because I smiled when you raised it, because I'm familiar. I haven't been able to buy gas in Canton for a long time because of the pricing around it. The great news about the contrast to Costco is, as you see, we have a row of single islands across the front of this. Costco, as you're aware, has double islands, and essentially we are providing at least 3 stacking spaces. They have 4 to 5, depending on where you are. So we're actually in excess of what Costco has, because we're essentially only one line of pumps, not the double pumps and whatever. Depending, if you go to the Ann Arbor, they're triple pumps, but yeah.
I got you, but, you know, and the fact that the Saturday dates weren't even looked at, I mean, Saturdays, to me, I've been to Costco on the weekdays and I've been on the weekends, and the weekends by far are much more heavily traveled than on the weekdays. But, you know, if we're being told that the numbers are correct or they meet ordinance, then I guess there's not much I can say about it, but it's a concern of mine. I hope it doesn't become a problem.
We agree with you. We actually exceeded the ordinance on that element because we wanted the same comfort, so, yeah.
My criticism of the report, in that you compared the other BJ's locations to this, those are much bigger parcels of property and have much more room for things such as traffic stacking and that sort of thing. I think you're kind of comparing apples to oranges here. So I don't necessarily I understand studying traffic flow or numbers at those locations, but I don't know that that necessarily gives you a good view of what's going to happen at this property, given its size and the things that you have around it. I'm not opposed to what Commissioner Cruz is saying about looking at a report that more accurately reflects current situation here. I'm not going to require it, but it is a concern of mine. I understand we can't really speculate right now what's going to happen with Ford Road. I mean, for all we know, it's not going to happen in our lifetime, the way things are going, but I hope it does, but we can't count on that, I don't think, right now. So all I can look at is what's in front of me right now. And I have concerns just about the space in general. I have no problem with the gas station itself and that sort of thing. I understand the need. I think it's great that it's coming to Canton, but I am worried about the traffic flow in terms of the stacking and how it impacts this particular space.
Eggenberger.
Hi, thanks, and I do want to thank you for the new road. Really,
It took some work, but we
Yeah.
appreciate it, yeah.
it's lovely. I'm trying to look at this traffic flow, so there's only one way in?
You come in off that back entrance there. That way, it was designed that way to essentially ensure that all stacking would have been handled and all the flow would have been handled internally, because the greatest concern is not having people trying to get backed up coming in off of Ford Road. So, yeah.
There's 2
Yeah,
entrances.
but, 2. I mean, well, I'm sorry, yeah, there and that one. But, yeah, you can come in around and go. But
So you
we
can-
expect the predominant to be the back corner. But,
You can enter here, and then you would go way to the
yeah, around, just
west
depending on where you're
side
coming from.
and-
Mhm.
And head down and get gas, and then somehow go out.
And then for the exiting, we asked them to put the arrows in as shown there. So if you're parked, on the right side, you're directed to exit towards the right, and the left side towards the left to prevent any head-ons as someone's leaving the site. So all exiting traffic on the north side will go out the north, and then on the south side will go out towards the drive. And if they want to go back farther north, they can always turn left and go up the access drive.
Right, so I have to fill my car up on the left side. So I'm going to want to pull in so I can then pull in on the left, and then I'm facing the wrong way to leave.
Yeah, there's 2 sides to each pump, so you'll be able to, each pump, there's obviously 2 sides, so you
I'm
can.
going to grab the first pump that's available.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I just am.
Yeah.
I'm going to grab the first pump that's available. So So I could come in and be facing the wrong way to leave, right?
No, no, you'll be coming, all the traffic has to flow to the rear, to the left side of the site to load into the pumps. There's only one way to load into the pumps, it's from that direction.
I couldn't
That's where it all
scoot in
stacks.
the
I'm
other
sorry,
way?
yeah.
No.
How come?
Oh, yeah, that's.
I
it
mean,
all-
really,
Yeah, you're right.
maybe you
The-
don't want me to,
If
but
you've been to
couldn't I?
Costco in Livonia, this may give you a sense of what that.
No, I
Okay,
haven't.
so yeah, everything will flow from west to east in terms of the staking and the staging and the stacking to go to the pumps.
And we do have oversized length under hose, so it doesn't matter which one you pull in, you're gonna have plenty of room.
You can pull that to the other
get your
side if you
pump to
had
the
to.
other
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
But I could pull in wrong, right?
Wrong, the kiosk guy is gonna come out and move you in the right direction. That's what
Yeah,
what
he's
they're in
he's
for.
on full time there.
Yeah, if you turn, you're
Well,
gonna,
I'm just saying,
you're gonna be in so much trouble because you're gonna be turning into everybody coming out.
Don't go
right,
the
that's
wrong
my
way.
point. That's why I'm concerned about the flow here.
So we will, as Patrick pointed out, there is, part of the plan is to have actually the arrows on site, on the ground, directing, so that it will be hopefully obvious to people as to how to flow.
You know,
There
this
may be
feels
a
a
few
little bit like
strands.
drop-off in the
errants.
morning in schools.
We would be more than happy to add the big red signs that say, "Do not enter." How's that?
Yeah, well,
And then it's on you.
No.
You know, what I recommend with that, those arrows on the west right there, this is based on Ann Arbor Costco's. I would move those arrows as far west as possible because those arrows are gonna be covered up by cars no matter what.
so, Commissioner, which are the ones on this entrance here you're talking about?
Yeah. No,
So we'll-
in the, where the fuel pumps are,
Yeah,
the arrows
move those
further
far,
west.
a little farther east, you
Further
mean?
west.
So west is back towards the pumps?
Why don't we just add a second row?
Or
of
we can do a
arrows?
second row of arrows too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could just add a second row of
Yeah.
arrows. Yeah.
The Costco Ann Arbor has do not enter paint, like right here. I mean, people know, go
We're-
left or right. These are
Consider it done,
We're
yeah,
open to any of that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's a great suggestion, yeah, consider it done.
That way, when someone comes
Yeah.
in here, they immediately see the
Right.
marks that do not enter.
That and the enmity of 40 other people staring at them, but yeah, but we're gonna do it anyway.
These arrows are kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah, we know to go left or right. There's no
We're gonna call them the Eggenberger zone. It's, no, the special
Wow.
memory, no,
I'm
but.
just
no,
telling you,
but
anybody that's been at a school drop-off knows that sometimes those signs don't work.
I
and
totally
there's-
get it, but to your point, we will absolutely, we will do a do not enter just to help deal with that, but also if we have to double arrow or move the arrows on that. As part of our ultimate review with the building department, we'll sit down and, because they're gonna look at all signage, all markings and everything that we're gonna do there with them, so.
I guess my only other comment, and I think we all know that, is that basically this is getting rid of any foliage in this area.
No.
Well, I
there's-
know you guys are adding some, and I know there's a little bit on the side, but
There is-
we're
you're right.
paving paradise here, right?
There's
Putting in a
sig-
parking lot.
We've kept a substantial area between the pavement to that, which is existing, which will, other than when we're adding new and improved stuff, it will be all staying. And there's a portion not even on the property. We show it there, just to show you the curbing, that's all standing. And then, so there will be, it's almost like 20-some, 35 feet wide. It's a significant width we have. I don't, if we have the measurement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we are 30, from the back of the curb to our line, we're 35 feet to the curb. So that's essentially all staying.
Right, I think we know, though, that everybody will say, well, where did it go?
Oh, yeah, there's going to be a surprise as to the trees behind the ATMs and stuff like that, no question. The fact is, I think as the township, the tree survey shows, although we all love it and whatever, most of it would be defined as scrub. There is one tree that's requiring replacement, so there will be more trees added than will be removed by ordinance standards, so.
I just had one other question then. Your electric charging, which is back by if I remember, we talked about creating that loading dock that you guys have back there.
It's going to be over by the main store because and I met with the supervisor this morning more about the way the township wants to approach some of these, an overall electric charging plan so that the spaces are where people can go do something while their car is charging. So they're looking at overall township plan near restaurants and other things like that as well, so.
And will those be available to anyone, or will they
Yes.
have to be members of?
No, anyone can use those.
All right, great, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Okan?
project-wise, I have no problem with it. I just want to know when Nancy's going so I can avoid that.
It is, by
But-
the way, to that point, it is for members only, to his point only, so, yeah.
But, and a serious comment, Patrick, I think we're kind of, when we see more and more of these types of projects coming in where we're doing redevelopment of an existing shopping area like this with a lot of parcels, outlots, things like that, I think we need to try to get some internal sidewalks put in. I know it's going to take a long time to do anything like this, but it just seems like more days people are using bikes and just going around and walking, especially with Ford Road that's going to be under construction. People are going to be having a couple years there of no place really to walk. So I think I know it's a long, drawn-out redevelopment of all this stuff, but I think when we have opportunities, we should look into that. But other than that, I'm good. Thank you.
I think everyone on the commission has addressed any concerns I might have had, so,
Got a couple more things. So detention was master planned for this? Is that why you
The
don't have
entirety of the
detention?
PDD, it's the parcel to the east of the store site and it's a combination of some underground and that pond. But when the Lowe's was done in 2004, don't quote me on that, but it's part of the entirety of the site. The Target was built prior to some of the standards, so we had to bring the entirety of the site up to the standards for the retention to handle all of that at the time, yeah.
So Patrick, engineering's going to look at that and validate that for this?
Yeah, engineering will look at it, and it may even be subject to county stormwater as well.
Okay.
So either or both will be looking at it.
You have, like a tree ordinance where you're clearing all these trees? Is there any type of procedure to do that?
We have a tree ordinance, and it requires replacement based on number of trees removed. It's been the subject of federal litigation where the township was not successful in the tree case that came up, and that tree ordinance was challenged based on that piece of property. So going forward, we're working on updates to the ordinance, but in the meantime, what we do is we look at the impact of the site, the impact of the tree removal on the site, and what the environmental impact is to that site in terms of removal. And it could be a number of things where there's an impact. And then for any kind of mitigation, we look at what the appropriate mitigation is based on that removal. So it's a much more complex way of looking at tree removal than the letter of the ordinance that's there now. What the applicant has offered in the landscape plan is to comply with the current letter of the tree ordinance, which based on the removal, a lot of the trees that are being removed are exempt trees based on the species, based on the size. And so based on the tree removal, if they comply with the letter of the tree ordinance, they're required to do one replacement tree. And they've proposed on their landscape plan to show one replacement tree. So rather than looking at the individualized assessment of the site and look at impacts like that, the applicant has voluntarily complied with the tree ordinance of the one replacement tree based on the removal project.
I also agree that, this is not your fault, but I think in future master plans like this, we need to try to accommodate non-motorist movements. This one's a hard site because you'd have to retrofit and get rid of a lot of things to make it pedestrian and biker-friendly. But I think in the future, we should look closely at our master plan and ordinances. If you've ever been to, Birch Run, you have to drive everywhere. And that's a clear example of poor design, that you should be able to walk everywhere or ride a bike from store to store or whatever. But I think it's something that we can improve on. That's all I got.
great. Does anyone want to make a motion?
Dawn, I just have one more kind of rando question. Patrick, why is this called a filling station? Is this just some, is that like the official? Because filling station feels, as Alan said, old.
Well, we have an old ordinance, and
Fueling
that's how it's
station.
defined in the ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just how the ordinance classifies it. We call it we'll call it a gas station. That's the intent of what the ordinance.
But it is a distinction from a service station, though, where you have bays and, so the old ordinance had a couple things that you want to pay attention to, but I kept writing fueling station, and it kept getting corrected to fillings. I'm like,
Filling
whatever.
station.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I just kept reading it like, filling station. You want me to do that?
You do a motion.
I got one more thing. Sorry. Patrick, is this ADA space required? I'm a proponent of ADA, but it seems like no one would ever use this ADA space because it's, you
Boys.
can't go in. It's not a retail facility.
Boy.
But that's an ordinance requirement?
BJ's has employees that are ADA.
Oh, I got
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So they absolutely, it's part of
I
their
got
company
you.
policy, too, so, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
No problem, no problem.
All right, I'd like to propose a motion. I move to recommend approval of the site plan for automotive filling station on parcel number 71-040-99-0006-708 at 43690 Ford Road, subject to all state, county, and township requirements, and subject to execution of the PD agreement prior to the township board review of the site plan.
Support.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Eggenberger and support by Commissioner Okon. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, we got to take a roll call. Thank you. I think we were supposed to take a roll call before, and I said all in favor. Okay, Commissioner Okon, could you call the vote, please?
Commissioner Cruz.
In favor of the project?
Okay,
The motion.
I don't know how to do this, but I'm in favor of this project, but I want it noted that I'm recommending a traffic study analysis, but I'm not voting no against this project. I think it's a good project, and it meets all ordinance requirements, but
All right,
I just,
We would need to, we have a motion
do I
on the
do that?
floor. We would need to amend the motion in order to make it contingent on that.
If I may, Madam Chair, I would, obviously, you can do what you choose to do. We are going to continue to be working with engineering throughout the entirety of this process, so there will be engineering review processes going forward based on your concerns, but also the township processes. I would be very reticent to have a condition added that we engage in a new traffic study full-blown, because that would essentially put the planning process back to a start where we have to come back in and do other things and delay everything significantly. But we're going to constantly be working on this with engineering and the building department as we move
Why would you
forward.
have to come back?
Sir?
Why would you have to come back?
If it's a condition on the thing, I assume if you're going to add a condition, it's going to require us.
It could be, if you do the new traffic study, it can be subject to review by the township engineer and planning.
We are already by your process doing that, I mean, so, in terms
We
of with engineering.
understand, but we don't like the
yeah.
data. So, I mean, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Does that delay the project requiring a updated traffic study?
Well, it would take longer. First, they would have to procure the traffic engineer to do that. They would have to find the conditions under which they can do a traffic study, and looking at all the adjacent roads, make sure that it's not snowing, it's not a snow day, so they have to plan their traffic study accordingly. What's unique about this area is they would have to time it at certain times. So based on the traffic study they did, I think the midday of Saturday was probably the peak hour for that. So there would have to be the time of the lead up to having the traffic engineer ready to do the study, find the right day, and hope it doesn't snow or any other extenuating factors. And then if they can get the counts, they would have to compile that in a report, submit it to the township, and then the township's traffic engineer reviews traffic studies, which can be anywhere from a 2 to 4 week turnaround time. And then based on that review, depending on if there's any additional mitigation from the traffic study, there may either be site plan changes, or if no changes are recommended, then it would just be continuing as proposed in terms of a plan. So several weeks to a few months, depending on
I think the key element of that is, to your point earlier, when the study was done in December, the thinking was essentially high retail season or whatever. So the question is, if we were going to do new data on a Saturday, when do you do it? Because between now and the summer is essentially a low period of activity or whatever on that front. So to get to the period you want to try to achieve to get that data, so we applied the data from the busiest BJ's that we have to assume the worst case scenario.
I don't have a problem with what they're submitting right now. I mean, we have a motion on the table.
Right, I was
Let's
just
vote
going
on
to
the-
say
let's
that.
vote on the
Thank
motion.
you. Yeah, so can we call the roll?
Sure.
Yeah.
Commissioner Cruz,
No.
Commissioner Eggenberger,
Yes.
Commissioner Foster,
Yes.
Commissioner Jankowski, Commissioner Okan, yes, and Commissioner Weber,
No.
and Chairwoman Zuber.
Yes. All right, very good. So Patrick, what are their next steps?
The next step is that this will go to the Board of Trustees for final action. Prior to that, with the condition adopted, the PD agreement will have to be finalized and executed, and then once that takes place, it'll be ready for Township Board review.
Good, thank you. Thank you. All right, next up, we have a zoning ordinance text amendment, fences, walls, and borders. Patrick, tell us all about it, please.
All right, thank you. I spared you another report for fences, and I just used the report from last month. This came later in the January 11th meeting, and as you recall, that was a late meeting, and this was near the end, so we just did a brief once-over with the report, gave a little bit of a summary of the other reports and what we were proposing that evening. And essentially, where we left off was we're looking at fence standards for corner lots, and specifically those lots that are at the corner of a major road and an internal subdivision street, where we see many houses throughout the township that are on those corners where they'll have a 6-foot-high fence, that some of them have the fence in the backyard or the rear yard, and in some cases, that 6-foot-high fence extends toward the subdivision road, toward the side yard of the house, some of which go all the way to the front of the house. So there's quite a variation in terms of those types of corner lots in the township. And so back at I think it was the December meeting, many of the planning commissioners had expressed interest in having standards that allow a 6-foot-high fence along the major road on the side of the house to go up to the front half of the house, but to be behind the front of the house somewhere. And I'm not sure if we talked about specific distances, but I think where we left it was that we would come up with some photographic examples of fences just like that would terminate in front of the house or in front of the midpoint of the house. So, for example, this is just fence example one. There's several examples and I'm not going to go through each one. They're there. But we can jump to any one of those examples if you'd like to. This is one on Cherry Hill Road where this north-south road is a subdivision street and Cherry Hill Road is on the south. And we see that there's a 6-foot-high fence that's along Cherry Hill Road, and it goes a little bit in front of the midpoint of the house. And so if we look at the elevation of the house, we're looking at it from Cherry Hill Road, and the fence terminates, looks like about the midpoint, maybe a little bit in front of. And then the area along Cherry Hill Road and the entrance to the subdivision on the left, that's pretty much kept open and clear so that the entrance to the sub it's not walled off. And as you look into the sub, the first thing you see is the home and not necessarily the fence. We have many other examples, some of which go almost to the front, so it's more of like a visual preference type of example. We can look at these, look at ones maybe that you like, that you don't like, where you might want to see more examples or anything in between. And then once we have a consensus on where we might want these fences to terminate in terms of how far off the front elevation of the house, then we can go back to the draft ordinance itself and start writing text and give text examples at a future meeting. And then one of the other items that we'll be doing after we come to some conclusions on these entrance fences at the corners is at the next meeting or the meeting after, we'll start looking at internal subdivision streets where you've got lots at the corner of two subdivision streets and how some fences take place there. Those are probably the most complex issues that we deal with the Zoning Board of Appeals. But we thought that the best place to start would be along major roads so that we can address the issue of fences along major roads, which are technically front yards if it's a subdivision with their yard adjacent to the road. And then we can work our way inward with other fence regulations on the internal streets. So I'll leave it there and take any questions, or we can walk through any examples.
Okay, thank you. Anybody got any thoughts?
I appreciate all the examples. This is perfect. It makes it a lot more clear.
Our interns did a lot of great work.
They did. Any comments or thoughts?
So what's the rationale of halfway on the house versus, I mean, what's the significance of that, I guess?
That's just one example. We're looking at where we should put it. So,
As opposed to the back.
yeah, as opposed to the back line of the house.
Seems like a lot of our houses have a access door on the side that leads to the garage. So it seems like a lot of people put trash containers or whatever outside that door, and it's just kind of blocks it off.
If you flip through all the examples, there are various points along the front of the house or the side of the house, and we're trying to determine, do we want to say it can't be within 2 feet of the front of the home, or not more than halfway across the front of the home or the side of the home, or what?
You look at example number 12, they don't have the side door of their garage fenced in. I would have no problem with them moving that fence to the midpoint of that garage so that door was fenced in. I mean, I totally get wanting that privacy or security or whatever you want to call it.
Right, yeah.
So, go ahead.
Well, Patrick, as part of the issue, if they get it too far to the front of, let's say it's the house or the garage, it tends to start to block the entrance into the subdivision. That's why we want to make sure we're telling them how far from the front of the garage or the house, rather than just saying, if you want to put it as far as the front of the garage, that's fine.
Yeah, because I think from our standpoint, it's important as for visual character and neighborhood character when someone drives into the sub, that it's a welcoming appearance, and that, I mean, fences are there for a reason. It's for privacy and security. But from a neighborhood standpoint, when you walk in, the very first thing as you enter the sub, we don't want that to be a fence. So if it's even with the facade, it's almost like the fence becomes part of that facade. But if it's stepped back some distance, then it may look imposing, but at least it may not overpower the facade, or at least you've got the facade some distance in front of it.
At number 3 example, where, when I look at kind of the picture, I guess, of the front of the house, it doesn't seem like it's all that close to the front of the garage, the fence, but then when you look at the side view, it kind of feels like it is. Yeah, so then it doesn't look like it's all that, I mean, it just looks fine. But you look at the next picture, and maybe it's just the angle.
Oh, yeah, this one, the second picture, this opening is a gate. So I think this comes almost to the front. Where it attaches, it might be right behind that gutter.
Oh, okay, so it does really go to pretty
If-
much the front of the garage.
If you look at there's a dark shadowy
Yeah.
vertical line, that's the,
Right.
yeah, thank you.
And
think of
this
the
is what we're
architectural
trying to
term.
say maybe we don't want.
But the other,
right?
the other added thing, though, they have the utility pole there.
Yeah. I think,
Well, aesthetically, or portion of that does seem uninviting, so if we're trying to do that, it has to do with massing, and I think that, I don't know how you state that with massing, because there's all kinds of different massing that can happen.
I think we'd want to pick a distance, a specific measurement that we would say it can't be in front of 5 feet in front of, from the front of the house or something.
Houses have been smaller, then the door might be there, the garage door, the functionality you're trying to achieve.
But then we can't, I don't think we can write a zoning ordinance that fits everybody, but, I think that, first of all, I doubt that there are too many side entry doors into garages that are that close to the front overhead door.
So does anybody else have issues with this, or someone done it well? You always go to people that look for examples.
Of the fences or the doors?
The way the fence, the lawns of the fence.
You mean a zoning ordinance that's written
Someone
well?
else has done it, yeah, you look at it and see who's done it well and who's not.
Have we looked at other zoning ordinances to see what the other communities have done?
Yeah, we'll have to go back to these, the side fences to see what they've said. In some cases, like if, let's say this were a side yard and it was next to another house and it was a bona fide side yard. Our current ordinance allows a fence in a side yard, but not more than 4 feet high. So that you can have a boundary, but it doesn't allow for much privacy and a little bit of security. Some ordinances don't allow any fences in the side yard. Others allow fences, 6-foot privacy fences, all the way up to the front of the house. But we can look at other ordinances to see how they address the side yard. Corner lots are much different because the way ordinances address those can vary pretty wildly. So we can look at that, but we'll also look at side yard fences as well, because I think we're going to get some of our best data there in terms of the differences.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so those corner lots, just a little bit of a background. Currently, the subdivision and site condo ordinance require that there be a 50-foot buffer strip between the sidewalk and the first lot in the development. But before that change was adopted many years ago, all of our subs, the lots went right up to the sidewalk. So all of these yards that are adjacent to the sidewalk, so most of our older subs are just like this, have these front yards continuously along these major roads. And because the ordinance doesn't allow fences to be located in front yard setbacks, you've got all these fences that either predate the ordinance or have obtained variances to be built or reconstructed.
Right. You can always come before the ZBA.
Having this extension fence like this, is that allowed right now? That's considered a fence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a fence and a front yard setback, although the fence ordinance has a definition of a border. And I can't remember what the definition of border was, or I think there's maybe a max height of 30 inches and a max length of 25 feet, if I remember. I don't know if this is intended to be a border. It doesn't look like it.
Somebody's opinion of decorative.
I mean, I'll be honest,
Doug likes it.
I don't think this is what you want right here.
No,
No,
Okay.
no, that's not what we want.
no, but you take that part away, and that's what we're talking about.
Right.
Isn't that a door, isn't that a side door over there next to that shed or whatever?
Yeah.
But this brings the point of whatever you do decide as the front or half, it should be written that the fence has to be consistent, height, materials, everything. You can't have a little extension that doesn't match the existing fence, I think that's part of it.
Yeah, and we can put that in the ordinance in terms of whether it's the same material or something where it's an aesthetic provision. If you're going to have a fence in a front yard, it's got to meet certain standards.
So I guess I'm aiming towards, and it sounds like everybody else is, somewhere kind of halfway in the middle of that side. And I guess I want our architects to have a little bit more say in terms of where you think that middle is, or how many feet make sense, and I know what I like, what looks.
Towards the end, want to make it a third or something like that aesthetically, and then maybe go for the variance if it creates an architectic doors.
So,
Go into the best good, or the most amount of good, all the people.
refresh my memory, Patrick. Part of the reason this has come up is because there are a lot of people requesting variances from the zoning board right now?
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing at the ZBA level right now is, like Patrick was saying, these are some older communities, or some older subdivision, and the fences are getting old and they're getting replaced. So as they're getting replaced, they're coming to the planning, or to the building department for a permit, and that's when it gets stopped. Yeah, so a lot of these, almost all of them, right, Patrick, that I've seen, it's all been really replacements. Nobody's ever come up to us with we don't have a fence and we want one. Most of them have been replacements.
Yeah, in some cases, they've asked for expansions, but most of the time, they have an existing fence and they want to rebuild the same fence or some part of it, or maybe a little bit more than what they had.
Well, they have to follow the new ordinances, so a lot of the old ones, I mean, the new ordinances, they have to be the same look on both sides of the fence. So a lot of the old ones aren't, because a lot of the old ones will have just the straight plats on the front side, but on the back, you have all the posts, like, oops. So, they have to follow that. So that's why we get a lot of shadow fences, and then the vinyl fences is really all we're seeing nowadays.
We have talked to our fence inspectors in the building division about some of the things that they see with fences where we could amend the ordinance to make things easier in terms of administering and enforcing the fence code. And one of the things that they mentioned was maybe only requiring the finished side of the fence to be on the outside. And there are many ordinances, many communities have a requirement that the outside of the fence has to be finished, but the inside of the fence does not, because it just faces the internal property owner. So that's something where with people that are getting fence permits, it could help with both cost savings and available options for fencing.
That's currently not allowed.
Right, both sides have to be finished now. So this will be one of the things we're addressing in the ordinance to kind of help on that end and be
Sure.
consistent with other ordinances that you'll see once the text is rolled out.
From an enforcement perspective, is it easier to talk about a specific dimension over, a third? I mean, should we say maybe 10 feet or 15 feet instead of 1/3 of the building width or depth or whatever?
From a permitting standpoint, my guess is they would probably prefer a distance. That way, when they look at it each time, they just have to look at a distance from the front corner and then run it from there. If it's a third, they would be looking at, is it a third along that particular elevation? Or if the house steps back, where they go from the third, and then if there's an addition in the future, does that change the conformity of a fence?
They have to do math to do that, so that's challenging too.
They're very good at it,
No
but
offense
it's
to
just a step.
I'm thinking of the people who are applying, not the people who work here, but
So
anyway.
we're talking about in context though, like where there's a side door on the side of the garage like this, as far as kind of the benchmark of where to put it, but I'm assuming some houses don't have that entry or egress, ingress on the side of the house. So if they don't have that, where do we put the line?
Yeah, and some people, they want it to the front of the house. Some people even want to go farther in front of the house because they want to maximize the amount of private area. So even if they don't have a door, if they have kids, pets, things like that, they'll want to maximize that area. So, but the presence of a door is hard too, because sometimes they add a door, sometimes they'll close up a door.
Yeah, and the door, I mean, I do residential architecture, and I think most of the time the door is similar in location to where that one is. It's towards the back of the garage, because you want to walk, you can walk in front of the cars to get to it. And those garages are typically 20 to 22 feet deep, probably, in the older housing stock in Canton. So if we said 15 feet, you know, we should be giving them plenty of room to have that door inside the fence.
I agree.
And then if they, from the front, yes. Okay. Evenly divided by 5.
Cases are there gonna be where people are doing this on corner lots? Mostly in the new houses, it won't happen.
It won't happen. In most subdivision, many of the newer subs,
Anybody that is left out there random,
right. And if they need a variance, they can get it.
grandfathered right now, so if this guy has his fence here, he's grandfathered if he goes to reinstall it, or does he have to?
He'll have to, he or she or both will have to comply with the zoning ordinance, because the ordinance currently states that, the fence has to comply with the ordinance whenever it's changed. So there's no legal nonconformity that if it's being reconstructed or changed out, then it'll have to comply with the ordinance at that time. So even people that are taking down a fence and putting up a fence, sometimes they're saying that they just want to replace what they have, and they still have to apply for a variance.
The option, if they can't, you know, if their door isn't where we're thinking it will be, then they can ask for a variance, or then they just put their fence behind the door. But, okay.
15 feet from the front of the garage, correct?
From the front of the house. Well, but I mean, I think it's the front building line or whatever. I mean, you guys,
Usually it'll be a garage,
generally, yes.
It should be house.
House, yeah.
It should be structure, because what if the garage is on the other side
Structure,
for some
yeah.
reason?
Will still be the front
Sure.
of the house,
Right.
the front of the
What I'm
structure.
saying is, we shouldn't say front of the garage.
Right.
That term should be, I got you.
Yeah, and what we can do is, we'll probably have the text read something from the front corner of that elevation, but we're also going to do graphics as well, just sketch graphics, just to illustrate it. So on this, we might have something like see illustration, and it'll show here's where the corner is, here's 15 feet, so that right now, there's really no illustrations in the fence ordinance, and we're going to have several illustrations just to help the owner and whoever's pulling the permit and the reviewer of where these are going to be.
Yeah, who gets to do all those sketches?
Well, we've got planning consultants that
Oh, good.
have art people that can do sketches, so.
Is there anything else we need to discuss about this, or is 15 feet going to give you enough to propose a rough draft?
Yeah, yep, we can go with that, and then next month we'll come up with another topic on fences, probably internal corners and that.
Well, I don't know.
That's what we do.
I've got some pretty intense dreams about fences, so I'm not sure that that's accurate, but, okay. You don't want to know.
Well, no, I'm talking Nancy.
Oh, Nancy. She's,
I can tell you fences are not in my dreams.
she's going to go the wrong way at BJ's gas station and
She's just a rebel.
dreams about fences. Okay. So we have another item for zoning text amendment, site plan review. Tell us more, Patrick. We're dying to know.
I've hit my quota, so Aaron's going to take this one.
Oh, okay.
Hello, good evening, everyone. If you recall, back in October 2022, we started to broach this topic of site plan review and making some procedural changes on how the site plans are reviewed here in Canton Township. And the reasoning why this is coming before you then and again now is because the township has initiated the process to become redevelopment-ready, community certified. And one of the certification requirements for the RRC certification is to promote best practices for the community. And one of them is to eliminate needless reviews for site plan, meaning that the site plan review is done, approved by the Planning Commission. It does not need to be then approved by the Township Board. Currently, that is the review process here in the township, is the Planning Commission will receive a site plan. They will make a recommendation to the Township Board. The Township Board has the final authority to either grant or deny. So by removing that site plan review process from having to go to the township board. It provides an expedited review process for the applicant. A lot of the items that you're looking at are very cut and dry, not really subject to modifications. And so if it's something that you've already looked at, it doesn't necessarily need to go to the township board. It is perceived to be a needless review. And most of the adjacent communities around us, they don't do this anymore either. It is an expedited site plan review process. So we discussed this back in October, and the Planning Commission had some feedback. So we started making some updates to the draft text, which is included in your packet. And there were a couple of items, major items, that we wanted to highlight as part of the red line of the text. Some of the amendments that we're proposing are very minor, but I wanted to highlight the top three that you'll be looking at. So the first one, as I noted, the Planning Commission will have the authority concerning all site plan reviews. So Section 27.02C9 has a stipulation that the Planning Commission authority concerning office district site plans. We're going to remove that section in its entirety because there's no reason to have any additional stipulation about the office district if the Planning Commission is going to be approving all site plans in the community overall. Item number 2, the expiration of a site plan. Currently, the way it's written, a site plan will expire 18 months after final approval if they have not begun construction or received their building permits. And in light of a number of factors that can take place that are outside a developer or applicant's control, we've decided to amend this slightly to allow for an applicant to petition to the Planning Commission to extend their final site plan approval for up to 2 one-year extensions. That means that before their site plan expires, they have to come to the Planning Commission and ask for an extension, meaning they will explain to you what's going on with their project, why they haven't been able to meet that 18-month deadline. And it'll have the Planning Commission's authority to decide whether or not to extend. But this gives them a little bit more leeway in terms of moving their project along without having to go back and start the whole site plan approval process all over again, especially if it was something, a pandemic, a recession, things that happened outside of their control that postponed their project.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think you just said this, that you've changed the actual, or we're proposing to change the actual number of months before it expires to 24.
Yeah, it's currently,
Also-
currently it's at 18.
18, yeah, but you're proposing to change it to 24.
Yeah, 24, it's a more of a round number, and with 18 months, it's, sometimes you can miss if you miss one construction season or it doesn't hit the cycle just right, then 2 years is much easier to do, and the last few years, we've experienced COVID, supply shortages, now interest rates. Certain things can delay projects, set them back a few months, and sometimes that results in a construction season. Some ordinances go only 12 months, which is a really short amount of time, especially with all the permitting that has to take place after a site plan is approved. So 24 months, it's a much better window.
So they would apply for 1 year extension at a time, but they can do it twice. So ostensibly, they could have,
2 years. If I'm an applicant, does it cost more if it gives me more cushion?
well, this way it gives the Planning Commission an opportunity, and it puts their feet to the fire to try to get their project moving forward. If we give them a full 2 years, they could just delay it and kick it down the bucket. So this gives them they've got 2 years by the site plan, by the change that we're going to be doing here, and then with the extension, they get an additional 1 year. So ostensibly, they could have 3 years, but we don't want it to keep postponing.
Well, a project that I'm thinking about just off the top of my head right now is the senior development on Ford Road. That seems like that's been stagnant now for quite some time, and I'm assuming, I think when we talked about this last, I think you mentioned there were money issues and that sort of thing. I'm assuming because the economy kind of took a dive and COVID and all that stuff. But they went great guns to clear the property, and now nothing's happening. It seems like it's probably been about a year since they got their approval.
Yeah, it's been more than a year. But because they're a planned development, planned developments have a 6-year term on them. And a lot of times it's because planned developments, they tend to be larger projects, multi-phased. And not always, but 6 years is the term on there. With that one, they have run into supply issues affecting cost of the project as a whole. I know they're still planning on going forward with it, but I don't know what their timing is at this time.
And when I say that, it's a separate approval, we approve we're approving the site plan as well.
Sometimes the PDD and the site plan are done at the same time. Other times, the PDD is done, and then the site plan follows up with the PDD because it'll have more details. And depending on how the agreement is written, some PDDs have the site plan term tied with the PDD term, where the site plan actually isn't regulated by this section of the ordinance, it's regulated by the PDD agreement. So then the duration of some site plans actually go longer if it's part of a PDD and it's written in the agreement that the site plan is on the same term. Pardon? I'll have to check their agreement to see if the site plan term is written in to be the same as the PDD term. I'll have to look at it.
And we can provide some clarification language when dealing with a PDD versus a straight site plan. So we can clean that up. And then the third item is to address methods of reviewing for major and minor modifications of a site plan, minor revisions of a site plan, developer instigated reviews. These are all relatively similar in some of the language and how it's being done. So we want to provide some clarity on the applicant as to which process is going to be, which process they're going to have to go for with their project. Is it a major revision, a minor revision, examples of each, develop instigator review, what that means, why that's different from other things. So this section is still a work in progress. There's some overlap between how things are currently being tracked, and so we wanted to bring that back to you with some clear language next time. So other language changes and additions that we've deemed to be minor are included in the red line text that you have. I didn't address them here because they're relatively minor. Some things are just changing a phrase here, a verb here, eliminating some obsolete language that doesn't need to be there. I'm sorry? I did some. I can't take credit for all of it, but some.
I have some minor English, and I think there was a few errors in the redlining. I don't know if you want to know about those now or if I should just send those to you. Yeah, like facade replaces the word plans instead of facade. So anyway, I will send those.
This is not the final text,
No.
just to give a good starting point for our discussions.
Sure.
So the proposed site amendment regulations, as we've written, are intended to comply with the RRC best practices. This would in no way eliminate the Township Board from being the final authority for special land use, PDDs, rezonings, or anything like that. This is strictly a site plan review process. So we're hoping to prepare some more formal language for you next month and continue this discussion. If you have any comments that you'd like to provide to me now, that'd be great. If you want to look it over, marinate on it a little bit, you can send them to us in an email. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes.
What about the township board? Do they have a say in removing the board?
Yes, so the way the process is that once your language, or once you're comfortable with the language in the redlining text, you'll set the public hearing, we'll notice it in the newspaper, et cetera, and then we will have the public hearing here, and you make the recommendation to the township board. This has already been something that has been discussed with a couple of board members, so because it's aligning with best practices, that's the reason why we're doing this. We're not trying to strip their authority for arbitrary reasons, but it's to comply with the RRC certification. But they are aware.
Okay, we had I think a preliminary discussion at the township board, maybe it was October of last year, yeah.
Are you guys worried about your authority being stripped?
No.
You're just hoping to get your agendas a little shorter? Excellent. Any other thoughts or feedback on that?
So what is the certifications? Does the township benefit from the certifications that you'll be receiving after these changes are made?
The RRC certification is intended to align with best practices that are outlined by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So this really is a bragging right that we have aligned with the best practices, and we have the process and the outlines and procedures that are best suited for applicants, developers, residents, et cetera. And it could qualify us for grants in the future and things like that. It doesn't mean that we're going to get anything the second we're certified, but it gives us a star in our cap that we can then pursue other projects because we're RRC certified.
I'm all for it. Let's make this improve.
Excellent. Well, we'll send you any feedback we have, Aaron. Yeah, thank you. So we also have a zoning ordinance text amendment to discuss regarding electric vehicle charging stations. Who's going to tell us about that? Sarah, I think it's your turn. Just kidding.
That one will be me, and I'm just waiting for my computer to continue scrolling. Just give me 1 second. Oh, why did the fences come back up? Sorry. I apologize. I don't know why my computer's all messed up.
Well, my computer's working, and I'll just say I think these are good ideas. I think it makes sense. Yeah, I really don't want somebody in my neighborhood having one in their front yard to charge.
With a credit card reader.
Exactly, so I was pleased to see that. I mean, I think it's things you guys are, make sense, looking at and thinking about.
That, I mean, we've had electrical, like, residents have gotten chargers for so many years, and we've never had the ordinance.
Thank you for your patience.
I think you should repeat that comment into the microphone.
Next to Alan.
So one of the items that we're going to be bringing to you for future discussion, and this is just a memo to give you a heads up that this is what's coming, is to start looking at electric vehicles and the charging station infrastructure. So this is something that has been on the Board of Trustees' interest in prioritizing a zoning ordinance amendment. They've been discussing this with us for quite some time, so we're getting going. So I provided you with just a brief history of electric vehicles, just because it has a long and distinguished history, even though it seems like it's only been within the last 10 years that it's really hit popular culture. So I learned something. I thought it was interesting. And then some of the electrical vehicle charging infrastructure that we need to look at. So there's 3 different levels of charging stations. Level 1s are generally minimal, where people use them in their residence or their workplace for an extended charging time. Level 2s are a little bit bigger than level 1s, but they still require about a 4 to 10 hour charging hour, depending on specifications. And then the level 3 is another freestanding structure, but it looks similar to a gasoline pump. So this is a much larger type of structure. And so when we start looking at level 2, level 3, the freestanding structures that could be placed on a commercial property, industrial property, we need to look at things of where we want them to go. So the need for an ordinance amendment is twofold. To provide clarity and transparency to the applicants and developers when they're designing or development or redeveloping a property, and they want to include those electric vehicle charging stations without being required to do so. So it's one of those, it's a community benefit, but how do they install them? Where do they install them? What are our stipulations for screening, parking lots, signage, et cetera? We don't want to be over-regulating and prevent people from including this type of infrastructure in their projects, but we need to make sure that we have clear standards that will meet the spirit and intent of an ordinance and also preserve the character of the existing commercial or industrial neighborhoods. And secondly, we want to talk about in which cases will we require electrical vehicle charging stations on a particular project. Is it when a building or a site is within a certain square footage? Is it any time that a property is being redeveloped, no matter what the scale and size? So these are things that we need to discuss how and where we want to do those and when it will be a requirement to install. So a couple of the areas that we're going to be addressing with the future amendment that we bring to you is a purpose and intent, and this is in every ordinance that will come to you will have a purpose and intent, and that's just to provide clarity to why the ordinance is being written and who it's directly going to impact and how it can benefit Canton residents in the long and short term. We'll have a section of definitions to provide clarity for any number of words or phrases that might not be in person's everyday vernacular. The permitted locations. It could be as broad as which zoning districts we allow them and where exactly on a particular site. Public and private use, payment and fees. Development standards, this is the one that we're going to spend a lot of time on. So parking, lighting, screening, equipment standards, et cetera. So these are the things, the meat of what we're really going to be discussing to make sure that, we have places on the property where they can be located without being a detriment to neighbors or to patrons of that particular business. So we don't have any specific staff recommendations at this time. We wanted to bring this to you and kind of get your initial feel for this, and also let you know that this is something that we're going to be discussing in depth over the next couple of months. So we welcome any feedback that you have, or if there's any points of concern that you want us to make sure we address out of the get-go, so that way we can provide as much research to you as possible, and we can have as expedited a process as we can.
One of the big concerns when you do put these in is getting the electricity. Some projects meet certification, but in order.
Your mic, sorry.
Have your mic on, sir?
Yeah. That's okay.
There we go.
Now we can.
So electrical, getting the electricity to them in the actual amount that they require, so the quantities. And that location where you're going to take it off, there's only a certain distance you can go before you start to lose your power, and that level 2 charger doesn't work. So, it has become popular. A lot of projects I've seen, developer was totally against them, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, now you've got this parking garage now we want these chargers. I'm like, well, we could fit a couple in. You want 6 or 8, but we're not going to be able to fit it in because the power isn't existing, and you have to. We have anybody, our staff engineering, is it electrical? Do we have an electrical engineer on staff? Could help formulate the guidance.
I don't know if we have anyone in engineering. I know we have electrical inspectors, and we have good local contacts with DTE. So I think within our network, both in the township and our liaisons with utilities, we can probably find that information.
That would be my recommendation going forward, because it would make it practical, or give us a practical understanding.
One of the things that the township board was looking at, and we had a study session on it maybe a couple of months ago, was how do we put electric vehicle chargers at township facilities, how many we have at each facility based on usage and number of vehicles that are there. But another conversation that we had was the difference between the level 2 and level 3 chargers. And I think in requiring businesses to do one versus the other and whether we have the power or the, not power, but
That
the
was a pun. That was good.
infrastructure to be able to have the level 3 charger. And so I think providing that information, not only to the planning commission, but to the township board as well, on what infrastructure is necessary would be helpful as we're making their final decisions.
So, let's say a retail development with the new EV requirement, the developer fits the bill for providing the electricity for these chargers? Is that correct? Is that how it works?
Chargers often
That's-
charge people to use them. So,
Right, I
so
think-
you would be paying you would be paying to use the charger.
Oh, I see. Okay, I thought it was, like I went to Traverse City and they had spots at the hotel and it was free of charge, yeah.
Well, it sounds like the one, the BJ's wants to pay, didn't Brian say it'd be free of charge? Or you did, or you not have, or did he say you don't have to be a member to use it?
I
Well,
think he
You
said
don't
you
have
don't
to
have
be
to
a
be a
member to use
member.
them.
But I think we put in the thing was that we would not have anything in our ordinance that said whether they have to put them in for free or whether they charge for them. That's up to the company.
Yeah, we're not, yeah, no, we're not getting into how, who's doing in private, who's doing in public. If they're putting them on their property and they want to charge an applicant for it,
Their
it's,
business.
you know, that's their prerogative. Whether we do them at township facilities, that's something that the township would address. But we're not going to require a private business owner or property owner from installing them and then giving that for free.
And I don't think that would be legal. Just to put that, just to say I said something tonight, that would not be legal to make them do it for free.
Record reflect.
Yeah, the only cases where we mention it in the memo is if someone has a single-family home and they put in a level 3 charger and they're going to charge the public, then we're talking about a commercial use of residential property. So we'll have things in our code to prevent things like that.
Not a home occupation then.
Correct.
What if they hide it in their garage?
Behind their fence.
Well, sometimes,
It's in their side yard, front yard.
There's there's a survey, isn't there, for electric vehicles? I saw something on the, is that
Yeah.
currently underway or is it done already, the survey? I was just
I
curious about it.
I think that survey ended at the end of February, like the 24th or 25th, I want to
But
say.
we're not till the end of February yet.
That's right, we're not.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, apparently I've skipped ahead. So I think
saw it on
I think that
Facebook.
expires at the end of the month.
I was just curious what the public thought about it, just curious.
I don't have any results on that yet.
Demand is really, 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 really high for the batteries. I know, that I'm starting to see that with the one plant we're working on, so it's super, super high.
It's weird having a survey, like, it seems like if you don't have an electric vehicle, some people will say, well, I don't care about it, I don't want them, you know? So I was just curious.
All right, anybody else got anything to say about the electric vehicle charging stations amendment? No? All right, let's move on to miscellaneous. This is staff reports, commission and liaison comments. A report? Who wants to talk about that?
I'll dive in. So the Michigan Planning Enabling Act requires the Planning Commission to make an annual report to the Township Board about its operations, the status of projects, planning activities, and recommendations to what is going to be taking place in the forthcoming year. So the report that's included this evening is the 2022 Annual Planning Commission Activity Report and the 2023 Work Plan. So you may recognize that this has come to you before. It comes to you at the beginning of every year, letting you know what you've done the previous year. So we want to show it to you before it goes to the Township Board, and highlight all of the wonderful activities you've done. So of the 9 Planning Commission members, and we noted that we have two new members this year, saying farewell to Greg Green and Chandru Acharya for their wonderful years of service. and welcoming Commissioners Alan Cruz and Jordan Janowski to begin your tenure. So we look forward to working with you both. So in 2022, the Planning Commission reviewed 24 site plans, and this includes amendments as well, 6 special land uses, 4 planned development districts, including amendments, 3 zoning map amendments, 4 zoning text amendments for seasonal sales, including outdoor sales and fireworks, and 1 temporary outdoor dining application. So these were the projects that came before you. There were some projects that were smaller and were reviewed administratively. Sometimes they required multiple reviews, so while you may think that you saw more projects than what I just listed, but some of them had to come back before you a couple times because they were tabled or they needed to amend something. For example, Zippy Auto Wash had the rezoning, the special land use, and the site plan approval. So you saw that project 3 separate times. So included in here is all the residential development plans, the commercial office development plans, industrial plans, and then the public and institutional development plans that you looked at. The public institutional, there wasn't a whole lot on that. It included the parking lot improvements for the township administration parking area on the south side of the building, and the Thomas A. Beckett site improvements for the landscape outdoor worship area. I've also included in here an update to the master plan. I'm not sure if you all know we're doing that project. But you do get the updates monthly on that. So there's really nothing, this just gives a summary of everything that happened in 2022, but you're well versed in that. And then we continue to talk about some of the other operation updates and accomplishments, including updates that our GIS department has undertaken over the past year. They've done a lot of work in coordination with the clerk's office, Canton Facilities, Leisure Services, updates to all of our zoning and street maps, creation of online mapping tools, and updates to data and circulation of maps to reflect current and future trails and sidewalks. They've been really busy. Our GIS guru has been really busy this past year. There's also been updates to the trail and sidewalk inventory, land use records, and electronic document management. The DDA was busy with their cross-access support, and so that's along Ford Road is making sure that businesses have cross-access agreements through multiple sites. So you can go from Wendy's to Chase Bank to this, to that, to the other without having to get back in and out on Ford Road. So it provides a service to patrons, and it also eliminates a lot of accidents and issues of going in and out of Ford Road multiple times if you want to hit multiple spots. We have an update on our tree program. So the Planning Services Division administers that continual tree program for planting trees, removing trees, many of which are located in our streets right-of-way, but also many of which are located on township facility properties or park properties. So it was a busy year with a lot of removal. Next year, we're hoping to really push forward with a lot of planting. There's been updates to our stormwater systems and our administrative procedures. As Patrick mentioned, we have a couple of interns who've done a lot of work and have helped us with a lot of things. So we want to mention that their services and their help has been invaluable over the last year. And new this year, we wanted to include, because the community strategic plan was adopted by the Township Board in 2021, so we wanted to include and show how a lot of the administrative tasks and a lot of the things that we've been doing in the Planning Services Division has been to comply or to further the goals and objectives that were outlined in the strategic plan. So those are provided to you for your reference. And finally, the most important, the 2023 work plan. So this is where we showcase and we talk about the projects that we want to include or want to accomplish or make great strides in the 2023 year. So the first one is the master plan. As you know, we continue to work on that with McKenna Associates. The Master Plan Advisory Board meets the second Thursday of the month. So they'll be meeting this month or this week. And so we hope to have that project either completed by the end of the year or at least the majority of it completed this year, with the eventual adoption date being early 2024. So that's the goal there. Zoning ordinance updates. So the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act requires that any zoning ordinance be based on a plan. So once the master plan is done, you'll be seeing a lot of zoning ordinance amendments coming through to facilitate and meet the goals and objectives that we have outlined in the master plan. But before that, we're also going to be working on some things that we have identified that need to be worked on, that need some clarity or need a massive overhaul. And a couple of them include our tree preservation ordinance, our sign ordinance, EV charging stations, which we just started discussing this evening, architectural standards for commercial, office, and industrial buildings. We've had a lot of applicants asking about painting brick in our community, so that's something that we want to look at, codify, and make sure that that the Planning Commission is all on the same page with that, so that way we can best assist and advise applicants and developers. Keeping of animals, and that can include chickens, bees, and anything else that might come up. The Cherry Hill Village Overlay District, that's something we want to look at, especially with the adoption of the master plan. And the Corporate Park Overlay District. Now, this is something that has been discussed over the last couple of years, and we've had a couple of rezonings lately that have removed properties from the Overlay Park District. So we want to look at that and see if that's something that we want to continue or we want to modify in some way. All of them. Storage, gas stations,
That's some car washes.
car washes, sorry, yeah.
Well, no, the apartments are the reason why we have mini storage.
Starting at 3,000.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then just to finish up, so redevelopment ready communities, as I mentioned, we're continuing to work through those tasks and being in compliance with those best practices. Our tree program, before it was done on a year-by-year basis, and so we really want to concentrate and make this a multi-year plan, so that way we know what we're planting this year, what we're planting next year, what we're looking at a couple of years down the road. So we have a long-term plan and long-term system for what we're looking at. Training, we're going to continue training in seminars, webinars through Planning Commission, ZBA, Township Board. We've been excited that you all have embraced the continual education, so we want to continue exchanging best practice ideas and making sure you're all up to date on the latest and greatest planning topics. We have a lot of GIS projects that are coming up in 2023. There's a great list there, but we're trying to make some of these some more interactive maps and some more user-friendly tools on our website for applicants, developers, and residents, just to know what's going on. We get a lot of calls in the planning division of, what is that property? What is this? And it would be nice to have an easier reference tool rather than, we'll look at the agendas. So have a nice user interface development tool that they can look at and see where certain projects are happening in their community, whether it's their adjacent neighborhood or it's just a place that they drive by every day, but whatever points of interest they have. The Maine Regional Planning, this is the Michigan Avenue Innovation Network. So we want to work with them, we want to work with adjacent communities and try to look at best ways to make Michigan Avenue as best as it can be. So this is still at the beginning stages, but the plan is to meet with regional agencies, community planners, consultants, to really look at the wants and needs of Michigan Avenue. And this will go hand in hand with our master plan process as well. And finally, Cherry Hill Village. Planning Division staff, we've been looking at the existing conditions of Cherry Hill Village. A lot of what we heard from our public engagement through the master plan process is that people want a downtown, walkable, family-oriented type area. And so part of the master plan process is we're going to look at Cherry Hill Village and see what goals and objectives we can fashion out of that public engagement events that we've done, and then really start to prioritize Cherry Hill Village as a local regional hub in the community. So we look forward to continue working with you all, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
talk about the master plan. Can you give us a brief update on the exciting month and fun updates?
Oh, yeah, I had forgot to include a model motion
Oh,
to
we have to make
recommend
a
approval
motion.
of the annual report. And then it'll go to the board, so it'll be a motion to approve the annual report, and then it'll be sent to the board.
I motion we approve the annual report.
Gosh, everyone supported that. So we have a motion on the table by Commissioner Eggenberger and support by Commissioner Foster. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor of the, whatever we're voting on, geez, the annual report. Sorry, I lost my place there for a second. Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Motion carries. Thank you. Now let's talk about that fun month and exciting updates or whatever it was.
I will make this quick because of the hour, and I've given updates here. So the one thing I want to discuss about this project is we're getting to a point now with the Master Plan Advisory Board, who's meeting on Thursday, by the way. So we're going to be talking, continuing our discussion on the mission, vision, value statements, responses, summary from the community survey. We're going to start talking about stakeholder groups, discussions, et cetera. But want to hear from the Planning Commission on how you want to start receiving their recommendations, receiving some draft text, receiving some things from staff and the consultants. Do you want to keep it on as an agenda item on a regularly scheduled meeting? Now, bear in mind, some meetings may be like last month, where it's 10:30 and we're still here, and then we have to have a master plan discussion. Or would you like to entertain the idea of a separate meeting to discuss master plan only items? Okay.
Before I say that,
I would,
let me finish my thought, please. Thank you. How much information do you think we'll be getting at a time? I mean, because I've been involved in these master plan discussions before, and I know they can go on quite some time, something depending upon what the issue is. Sometimes they go quickly, but a lot of times there's lots of debate about various things. I think to give it the proper attention it needs, I'm thinking it probably should be on a separate meeting. Because for us we're not doing our jobs if at 10 o'clock at night we're reviewing it, and at that point we're trying to get out of here too. So
like that idea.
I know no one wants another meeting to go to, but we still have a service to perform. So.
Any other thoughts?
Fine with that. My question, I guess for Aaron, would be, if we had an additional meeting, would it be monthly, or would it be, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking it would be monthly.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't foresee a situation where we would need to
I'm
have, 2 extra meetings a month to discuss a master plan. That I can't say that won't ever happen, but that's not my intent to bombard our schedules with 3 meetings a month.
No, I'm fine, just curious.
Yeah, I like the idea also. These meetings, our frame of reference, we're focused on the plans that we're given, and I think if you have a separate master plan meeting, it's that important to me that we focus just on that for that particular meeting, and your minds are fresh. Yeah.
Presenting the material to us, I mean, like, what's the first batch of material that'll be coming to us? I guess, is it how, or are you doing it by sections of the township, or how's that working?
Well, right now, what we've done thus far is we've started drafting some vision, mission, value statements, and those will form the basis of the goals and objectives and how we address and how we talk about topics throughout the project. We're also, on Thursday, we're going to be going over the community survey results and responses, and looking at the demographics of the responses that we have received and who needs to, what groups we haven't hit yet, and then scheduling stakeholder discussions. So we're still compiling some of our public engagement. We're nearing the end of that portion. So you will be receiving those types of things. And when we start, it's going to be a little bit on the shorter side, but we are going to be getting into some heavier hitting topics, like looking at Cherry Hill Village. That is a discussion point all its own, right? Ford Road, Michigan Avenue, though, that's going to be a topic. Housing in neighborhoods, that is a topic. So those things will be presented to you, and it will be providing a history of said topic. So if we're looking at Cherry Hill Village, we'll be presenting the history of how it was designed, why it was designed, an analysis of impediments, why it hasn't matured or evolved the way it was originally intended to, possible ideas on how that could be improved. And so all of these things will be discussed, and then it'll go to the advisory board first. They'll kind of have the first crack at it, and so their recommendations or their ideas will then come to you along with staff and consultants. So we'll be able to provide you with an overarching idea, maybe some draft bullet point text on what we want to include in the formal document. The Planning Commission will ultimately be the body that will look at every single word, every single chapter, every single map, every single everything. The advisory board will get things more in bullet point, but you will be the ones who are responsible for everything that goes into the document. So having a separate meeting where you can then read and synthesize and analyze and go over full bodies of text could prove best, especially as we get further along the process and you're looking at larger swaths of information.
Can we look at, like for example, next month, if there's just a few items we can, and there isn't that much on our agenda already, could we add it to this agenda? And then as we get more and more information that you're going to be giving us, then we have a separate meeting? Because I don't want to get together for 15 minutes, no offense to y'all, but, if it's going to be very brief.
That's fair. That's fair. So what I can do is after we have the meeting with the Master Plan Advisory Board, and once we kind of see how things are shaping up with the agenda for the regularly scheduled Planning Commission, because if there's one item on the agenda that we're going to discuss or just a couple of zoning ordinance amendments, we can have a couple of small discussion points. But if it's anything that's going to be large-scale presentation-wise, we'll still want to have that. But yeah, for the first couple of meetings, we can look at it that way.
Thank you.
So is the format in person, or is it
Yes.
going? So it's in person, it has to be in person?
Yes. So the way that it's scheduled out, it would be the third Monday of the month, here, 7 p.m.
Mark, you can't.
In this room?
Yes.
Okay. Starting in March? Or not necessarily. Yeah.
We don't need to make a motion on that, right? Okay, thank you. This normally would be our public comment section, but we don't seem to have any members of the public here, so. So, I don't know, do you guys want to hang out, or does anybody want to make a motion?
to adjourn.
Thanks. All right, everyone. Oh, well, I mean, all right. Who made the motion? I didn't even know. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Weber and support by, I'm just going to say, Commissioner Cruz? Oh,
He's buying at the bar.
all right. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?